Ever find yourself kind of lost in the perfect playlist, noise-canceling headphones on, maybe during, like, a bumpy car ride?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Happens all the time.
Well, in those moments, you're experiencing, like, a whole technological symphony. That's digital signal processing, DSP.
Yeah, DSP. It's kind of the invisible engine driving so much of our digital lives.
Right. And today, we're going to try to make that invisible engine, well, visible. So DSP, to break it down, is basically about messing with signals,
Mm.
extracting information, cleaning them up, or even just, playing around with them.
Exactly. It's about taking something raw and shaping it into something useful, something better.
And when we say digital, we're talking about representing these signals, not as like waves or anything, but as just a whole bunch of numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Think about it like translating a painting into a code that a computer can understand.
Oh, I like that. So it's taking something that, our senses can experience
Yeah.
and turning it into something that computers can manipulate.
Precisely. And the cool thing is, this whole idea, it goes way back. I'm talking like way before computers were even a thing.
Really? Way back. How far back are we talking?
Think back to the 1800s. Mathematicians were already developing the fundamental math behind signal processing.
The 1800s. That seems, I don't know, a little low tech for something as, cutting edge as digital signal processing. What were they analyzing back then? Smoke signals?
Not quite. They were analyzing things like sunspots, trying to understand solar activity by looking at those patterns.
Sunspots. That's wild. So how do we get from analyzing sunspots with, I don't know, a quill and parchment to, well, everything DSP is today?
Well, the big turning point was the arrival of computers. Suddenly, all those complex calculations, all that math, it became way faster and much more practical. And as computers got more powerful, DSP just exploded in terms of what was possible.
Okay, that makes sense. So instead of just crunching numbers to understand something that's already there, like those sunspots, we could actually manipulate the signals themselves.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Before computers, signal processing was like observing a wave on the ocean. But with computers, we could suddenly surf.
Oh, okay. Now we're talking. Surfing those signals. And I'm guessing that newfound ability to surf led to, well, a whole tidal wave of applications.
You got it. Today, DSP is everywhere you look. Your phone uses it constantly for noise cancellation, for processing your voice during calls. It's in medical imaging, allowing doctors to see inside the human body. It's even used in self-driving cars to help them navigate.
Wait, hold on. From my phone calls to self-driving cars, that is a crazy wide range. How does that even work?
It might sound crazy, but at its core, it's still all about manipulating signals in order to achieve some kind of goal, whether that's cleaning up audio or analyzing images from an MRI or helping a car understand its surroundings. It all boils down to processing those signals in a way that gives us meaningful information.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. But digital signal processing still feels kind of broad as a term, like saying cooking, when you could be talking about anything from a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to, some fancy French five-course meal. Are there like categories within DSP, like different specialties?
You're absolutely right. There are tons of different flavors, you could say, within DSP. Think of it this way. You have your basic ingredients, right? Your signals, and then you've got all your different cooking techniques. That's where the categories of DSP come in.
Okay, I'm following you. So what are some of those cooking techniques? What kind of culinary magic can we do with these signals?
Well, one of the most common techniques is called filtering. You can kind of think of it like using a strainer to remove unwanted parts of a signal, like noise in an audio recording.
Okay, so like an audio equalizer, but probably way more precise and powerful, I'm guessing.
Oh, absolutely. Way more powerful. And then there's another technique called sampling rate conversion, which is essentially changing the number of samples you take of a signal every second. It's kind of like changing the resolution of a digital image.
Interesting. So like making the image sharper or more detailed.
Exactly. Or in the case of audio, it might be about making a file smaller so it can be streamed more easily without losing too much quality.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So we've got filtering, we've got sampling rate conversion. What else? What other DSP techniques are out there?
Well, there's a whole universe of them, and some get pretty complex, but one that's worth mentioning is called multi-rate processing. It's like the conductor of an orchestra, coordinating different signals that might be coming in at different sampling rates, making sure they all work together seamlessly.
Ah, so it's about bringing order to the chaos. But before we dive deeper into all these different techniques, I'm kind of curious, what makes digital signal processing different from just, plain old signal processing? Is it just the computers?
That's a great question. And you're right, computers are a big part of it, but it's really about the fundamental way we represent the signal itself.
Okay, so break that down for me. What's the key difference?
Imagine listening to music on a vinyl record. That's analog signal processing in action. The grooves in the record directly represent the sound wave.
Okay, I can picture that.
Digital signal processing, on the other hand, takes that sound wave, converts it into a series of numbers, and then uses those numbers to store, process, and play back the sound.
So it's like the difference between, say, a hand-drawn sketch and a digital illustration. They can both represent the same image, but the digital one gives you way more flexibility for editing and making changes.
That's a perfect analogy, and that flexibility is exactly what makes digital signal processing so incredibly powerful. You can do things with digital signals that would be absolutely impossible in the analog world.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. So we've got flexibility, we've got power. I'm definitely starting to see why DSP is such a big deal. But we're just scratching the surface here, right? I mean, we've got all these different categories, these techniques you're talking about.
Absolutely. We've only just begun to explore the world of DSP.
Well, I'm ready to dive deeper. Let's talk more about these flavors, these techniques. This filtering thing especially has me intrigued. I'm a sucker for a good Instagram filter, so I can only imagine what kind of magic we can do with real DSP filtering.
Oh, get ready to have your mind blown, because filtering is where DSP really starts to shine. So filtering in DSP, it's kind of like having this super precise, super customizable equalizer, not just for audio, but for anything. Video, sensor data, you name it. Imagine zeroing in on specific frequencies and fine-tuning them with incredible accuracy.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a few steps up from my Instagram filters. So where does this level of control really make a difference? What are we talking, real-world examples?
Tons of them. But let's take medical imaging. Doctors use DSP all the time to make sense of those images from MRI or CT scans.
Right. Makes sense. Those images are so detailed.
And filtering is how they cut through the noise. It helps them to highlight specific features, makes it way easier to spot, say, a tiny tumor or some abnormality that might otherwise be invisible.
Wow. Okay, so filtering is literally helping save lives. That's pretty amazing. And to think it all goes back to those early mathematicians just, studying sunspots.
It's wild, right, how these things connect. And speaking of connections, let's talk about sampling rate conversion for a sec.
Oh, yeah, right. That was the whole changing the resolution thing, wasn't it?
Exactly. Imagine you've got this super high resolution audio file, right? Awesome quality. But then you need to play it on a device with a lower sampling rate.
Like an older phone or something.
Yeah. Or maybe you're streaming music and have limited bandwidth. So you use DSP to downsample that audio, make the file smaller without hopefully sacrificing too much of the sound quality.
So that's how we avoid that, like, distorted, crackly mess you sometimes get.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between size and quality. And it works the other way, too. You can upscale audio to a higher sampling rate. It's becoming more and more important as high-fidelity audio streaming gets more popular.
Right,
Yeah.
right. People want that super crisp sound. Okay, this is really cool stuff. So we've got filtering, sampling rate conversion. You mentioned there were other categories of DSP too, other ways to cook those signals, as you put it.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole world of techniques out there. Some get pretty intense, but one that's worth knowing about is called multi-rate processing. It's like, imagine a conductor leading an orchestra. Multi-rate processing is kind of doing that for signals, especially when you've got different signals coming in at different sampling rates.
Oh, okay. So keeping everything in sync.
Exactly. And it's essential in things like telecommunications, where you've got all these signals flying around from different sources. Multi-rate processing makes sure they can all work together.
Got it. So kind of like the United Nations of signal processing, making sure everyone can, understand each other.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And as we look to the future, there's this whole other level of DSP that's emerging. AI-powered signal processing.
Oh, now you're speaking my language. AI. Everyone's talking about it. What's the connection to DSP?
Well, think about it. Traditionally, the way we've designed DSP algorithms is basically by hand. A lot of trial and error, lots of tweaking to get it right.
Yeah, I can imagine. Pretty labor intensive.
But with AI, we can actually train machines to learn those patterns in the data and even create their own algorithms.
Whoa. So like teaching a computer to be a DSP expert.
In a way, yeah. And it's super exciting because AI can often spot patterns and make connections that we humans might miss completely.
So what kind of cool stuff will we be able to do with AI-powered DSP?
The possibilities are pretty much endless. Imagine, for example, noise cancellation so good it can adapt to any environment, instantly filtering out unwanted sounds no matter where you are. Or medical devices that can analyze your vital signs and actually predict potential health problems before they even happen.
Okay, now that is seriously cool. But with all this potential, are there any limitations to what DSP can do? Can it really do anything?
Well, as with anything, there are always challenges. One of the big ones we're always wrestling with is processing power. As the signals we're dealing with get more complex and the algorithms we're using get more sophisticated, we need faster and more efficient hardware to keep up.
Right, so it's like a constant race, trying to push the limits of what's possible, but always bumping up against the limits of the technology itself.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the challenge of making sure these DSP systems can actually function in the real world.
What do you mean?
Well, in theory, a lot of things work perfectly on paper, right? But in the real world, you've got to deal with things like noise, interference, all sorts of unpredictable factors that can mess with your signals.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you can design the most aerodynamic car in the world, but if you try to drive it on a dirt road, you're not going to get very far.
Exactly. Real world conditions always throw a wrench in the works. But,
Yeah.
despite these challenges, the future of DSP, it's incredibly exciting. We're really just scratching the surface of what we can do.
And speaking of scratching the surface, before we wrap things up here, can you give me a sense of where things are headed? Like, what are some of the big frontiers in DSP? What are the researchers kind of geeking out about these days?
Ooh, that's a fun question. Well, one area that's really starting to heat up is this whole intersection of DSP and quantum computing.
Quantum computing. Okay, now we're getting really futuristic.
It does sound like sci-fi, but it's closer than you might think. Quantum computers, they have this potential to just completely revolutionize how we process signals. Like, we could be talking about breakthroughs in everything from like drug discovery to material science. It's huge.
Okay, so break it down for me. What makes quantum computing so powerful for DSP? What's the big deal?
It all comes down to how quantum computers actually work. They use these things called qubits, which can be in multiple states at the same time. Unlike our regular computers, that can only be a 0 or a 1.
Right, right. I've heard a little about this. It's like they can explore tons of possibilities simultaneously.
Exactly. So imagine unleashing that kind of power on complex signals. Signals that would take our regular computers years, maybe even centuries to process. A quantum computer could potentially do it in like minutes.
Okay, yeah. That's next level stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like giving, I don't know, like a superpowered brain to an already powerful tool.
That's a great way to put it. And that's just one example. Another really cool area is bio-inspired signal processing.
Bio-inspired, so like looking to nature for inspiration.
Exactly. We're learning so much by studying how living organisms process signals. Like, think about how bats use echolocation to navigate, or how our own brains make sense of all the sounds around us.
Right, right. Those are some pretty impressive feats.
And the crazy thing is, they're doing all of this with like way less processing power than even our most advanced computers. So by studying these natural systems, we can find all these new and creative ways to design more efficient DSP algorithms. It's pretty amazing.
It really is. It makes you appreciate just how elegant and complex those natural systems are.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize how much more there is to learn. We've come a long way from analyzing sunspots to the brink of quantum computing, but we're still just scratching the surface of what's possible with DSP.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to leave it. We've covered a ton of ground today, from the basics of DSP all the way to the mind-blowing possibilities of the future.
It's been a blast.
Yeah, this was great. And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the invisible world of digital signal processing. Keep an ear out for it. It's everywhere. And who knows what incredible new applications we'll be talking about a year or 5 years, 10 years down the line. Until next time.